Trader viewers, thank you for tuning into Supermariodiagnostics once again. Today we are working on a 2015 Jaguar XF, and it's got the smaller engine in it, a 4-banger, and it's got a dead misfire with a check engine light blinking. And I tried to do a clear flood mode on it just to hear the cranking compression rhythm, and I was unable to do so. On some of them they do work though. I have had my fair share. I think on the older ones they do work. It's a hit or miss, but they do work if you hold that pedal down. On this one I could not get it going. It's got 121,000 miles on the clock. Let's go ahead and recreate the symptom, and it is immediate. As soon as I turn on the vehicle, it just starts misfiring. You won't be able to tell, but it does go right into restricted performance with the check engine light blinking. So I typically like to start with a cranking compression or clear flood because it is the easiest thing to do most of the time, and it tells you, it gives you a lot of direction. But I also like to sometimes bring out that ignition analyzer and see if there's anything going on ignition wise, or maybe fuel related issue. We're going to confirm if it's only one cylinder or if it's multiple. So let's go under the hood, turn on the vehicle, and make sure that it is number one as it does say in the pre-scan, and let's make sure that there's no other ones that are actually misfiring. So let's go ahead and do just that. So we can see the shaking. Hopefully you can see the shaking. And disconnecting number one does nothing. Disconnecting number two does have a change. Disconnecting number three has a change. And disconnecting number four also has a change. Let me just go grab that tool real quick. I don't believe this thing has a cylinder deactivation. So, and they drove it in this way. Don't know if you guys will be able to see this clearly, but I'm going to try here. Got number one. We definitely have spark, and it is extremely comparable to the rest. I don't see a lean condition either. There is a bit of a nose at the end of the burn line compared to the rest. It is a GDI, so they do err a little bit to the lean side. But it is a little higher. It's just a small detail, so we could be running lean here. But I'm going to do my due diligence and crank it with all of the coils disconnected. Since we are unable to disconnect the injectors, for a small test, for a very quick short test, this shouldn't be a big issue. We're simply looking to listen to the cranking rhythm. And I'm gonna put another mic here so you guys can listen to it. Let's go ahead and crank this thing. It almost sounds like there's too good and too low. To be sure, I would like to put an amp clamp and confirm. And of course there's no starter wire right here. Maybe it's easier to just get voltage. So let's go ahead and try that first. And let's see, we could sync off of one of these. So I do see we can set up a sink and all that all together. I'm going to get my picoscope started. And of course, you guys are going to want to see all that, so let's go ahead and do just that. This may be a real-time video. So it's a 3-wire coil, so I don't suspect that this is going to be a primary signal. It may have a 5-volt signal, so I'm just going to go with that and wire it up that way. And since I have it disconnected, I'm going to front probe the coil. And this could very well be cylinder wash, fellas. Let's not, you know, assume anything. I'm not gonna assume that just because it's low, it's not cylinder wash. We don't know yet. So there we are, front probed to the coil. Let's go ahead and hook up our battery voltage somewhere. I think I'm gonna try it from the OBD port. If we're lucky, we'll have a good waveform. And I'm just gonna throw that in the car. And I'm actually gonna hook it up with my positive lead on ground so that I don't have to invert it in the waveform in the software. So that is something that you're gonna wanna be careful with, because the picoscope allows for that, but not every scope allows us to do something like that. I'm gonna put that right there. We're gonna turn on our other channel, and let's see if we get lucky with some kind of a waveform here. It sounded like too low, too high. We're synced to number 1. I don't know the firing order yet, and my fault. I completely forgot to reconnect my pico. I'm constantly going back and forth with this pico, so my mistake. All right. And sometimes the pico does that. I hit the space button and it starts all over again. It's something that I really can't stand. So we're gonna have to redo that capture. With a single cylinder misfire, I would expect it to only have one low compression, but since it sounds like 2, gotta make sure you guys can see this clearly. Voltage will always be a little dirtier, so let's put some filtering in there. And let's also bring it up, let's scale it up a little. So thankfully, it's our ears playing games with us. We have confirmed that we have low compression on the single cylinder, number 1. It did sound like too high, too low. I wanted to play it safe, that's why I did the relative compression test. But I think our best bet next is to rule out cylinder wash, and to do that, I've gotten this question plenty of times. How do you rule out cylinder wash? Well, we're gonna check. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, and we're doing this in real time. So the way I do that is, you know, if I have someone cranking it for me, I could put a piece of paper on top of the oil filler cap. But since I don't, I'm gonna put a bladder here along with a pulse sensor. And yeah, you guys can watch the whole setup, I guess. I'm gonna make this as painless as possible. Got a new cable, by the way. This is from Diagnostics. I mean, it's the most high-end cables I could find. And if you guys don't know who Diagnostics is, go check them out. These things have lasted me. They are very well made, and I'm pretty happy with them. I constantly get leads. I've replaced these leads, not these particular ones, but the BNC to BNC. I've replaced them a million times. It just never ends. So it's good to finally have found one that is just gonna handle what I need it to do. So I need a bungee, and I don't have one on hand when I normally do. So let me go fetch that real quick, and hopefully we don't get muted for the music. And got our bungee right here. The idea is to suspend it and mitigate vibration from it. And we are set up. All we have to do is put the channel now. Let's hook up this channel here. Let's turn it on. Since it's crankcase, I don't expect it to be too much, but I think a 0 to 10 volts should suffice. Let's give that a shot. So I'm gonna go ahead inside the vehicle and start cranking this thing. And I'm gonna carefully stop the pico capture, because if I'm not careful, it'll just start all over again, and then I have to do it all over again. All right, so that looks a little messy, right? Let's see if we can clean this up a little. I like to make these huge just so that I could see these lines right here. Bam, right there we got our partitions. So make sure you guys can see this correctly. And as you guys can see, if you can visualize it, let's do one. It's gonna look big, so we're gonna put a partition, a ruler with 4 partitions, and that is to represent the 4 cycles of that cylinder, that number 1 cylinder. And we can see that this is the power stroke, the cylinder's coming down. This is the exhaust stroke, that cylinder's coming up. This is the intake stroke, the cylinder's coming down. And finally the compression stroke, the cylinder's coming up again. With every single time that number 1 cylinder is coming up, it is also pushing, if we put a horizontal line here, it is also pushing the average pulse upwards. So there you can see, oops, you can see that we have an upwards pulse there. So we do have compression going into the lower end, is the point that I'm trying to make. So somebody was asking, how do we check for cylinder wash? It is just like old school, fellas. If I had a piece of paper and someone cranking this thing, my brother's real busy right now, I would just do that. But with this, I can also present this to the customer and show them that, hey, listen, this is your crankcase pulse. Every time your number 1 is going through compression, it is also pressurizing the crankcase. And the same thing goes for the power stroke. If we're familiar with the in-cylinder waveform of an engine, we would see that the power stroke goes into a vacuum right before the exhaust valve opens. So it is pulling that same vacuum from the crankcase as well. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment in the comment section. But next step is very simple. We're gonna have to find out what caused the cylinder wash, and is it cylinder wash to the point where it is repairable and we could put oil in the cylinder and bring the compression back, or did it score the cylinder? So I think the easiest thing would be we could check spark. We checked spark, we saw spark. That's the thing. So this leads us to, this kind of boils it down to two other things. We could swap the coils from one cylinder to the next, see if it follows. I doubt it will, but it won't hurt. But I think we're gonna have to end up taking out that spark plug, putting a Borescope in the cylinder, making sure that there's no scoring there. Put some oil in there, see if it comes back up. Take a look at the injector. Maybe the injector is dripping. We can do a lot with just one tool with the Borescope in the cylinder. So I think that would be the easiest, most data heavy, convenient thing we could do, is stick a Borescope in there, take a look at the spark plug. Is it full, is it fueled up, full of fuel? Is it clean? Is the injector head clean from the fuel, excessive fuel? Is it dripping with fuel? Is there a pool of fuel in the bottom? Is there scoring in the cylinder? Is it beyond repair? Can we put oil in the cylinder and bring it back to life? Wet and smells like a little bit of fuel there. All right, let's go ahead and stick this Borescope in there, see what we find. We do see some cleaning there. You see the carbon has been cleaned off a bit. I do see a little bit of scoring, but let's not jump the gun. Look at all that fuel, fellas. And look at that very clean injector. I'm gonna try to turn on the key and see if it starts dripping. We got no drip. So, unburned fuel. What can cause unburned fuel? Low compression on its own can cause unburned fuel. Check out that score. Weak spark can cause unburned fuel. A rich injector can cause unburned fuel. So, what can we rule out easily? We can pretty much rule out any of these easily. We already have the spark plug off. Let's go ahead and put some oil in there and crank it over again, see if compression comes back up. Once compression comes back up, I'm also gonna swap the coil over to the adjacent cylinder. Even though we saw spark, but we want to make sure that we're trying to rule out as much as we can, right? So pretty much we're ruling out compression itself as the issue. You know, if we put oil in the cylinder and it doesn't improve, this is a dead end. We're wasting our time. So if it does improve, then at least we can move on to as what the culprit is. It's either going to be an overly rich injector or a weak spark. But according to the waveform that we saw, that spark is doing just fine. Bad news. That is after oiling up the cylinder very well and inhibiting fuel delivery by manually giving it power with a power probe to the starter solenoid. There is no saving this one. That cylinder is no good. I decided to go straight for the leak down because of the amount of compression we lost was just incredible. And as you can see, you probably won't hear it. Let me see. I'm gonna put a microphone real close to it. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but we're leaking out of the crankcase, and when we close this, it is now coming out of the intake. So which one is it? Is it the intake or is it coming down on the lower end? That's a very easy one to solve. We've got a breather tube right here that comes, it's part of the PCV system. I know somebody's gonna get on my case about this. Yep. And then if you hold your finger here and check at the intake tube, nothing happens. So fortunately the lower end is done on this one, and there is no saving it. So we're gonna have to give the news to the customer and see where they want to proceed from here. But in a nutshell, that is how you check for misfires and how to check to see if there's cylinder wash as an issue. One of the things I should have done though was isolate the crankcase from the intake during my pressure waveform analysis and testing. I do get several people who joke about me saying that often in Facebook. I do tell a lot of people, well, did you isolate the crankcase from the intake system? And this is exactly why, because somebody might overlook that one little detail, or they'll see that there's air coming out of the intake and they'll pull the heads off and it's a lower end issue. You're supposed to, even in a leak down or during this pressure waveform testing, isolate, if at all possible, the intake from the crankcase in order to not skew your readings. This could have very well been, if I would have done my due diligence and isolated the two systems from each other, I could have made the wrong call. It could have been, I could have taken an intake pulse waveform and saw the same thing because they are open to one to another. So I could have saw the same exact thing during the compression stroke. I would have saw a pressure rise during the compression stroke in the intake waveform as well. So just a super quick tip not to get burned. We got lucky that we didn't get burned, and if there's ever any doubt, there's no problem with doing leak downs. I barely do leak downs anymore, but when it comes to situations where it can easily be a big deal job or not, then I'll break out the leak down just to be 100%. But let's see if they approve and take it from there. They want you to take all this out so you can get it out through the top, but you could just lower the subframe and get it out through this hole here. Whoops. Nice. It's much easier that way. You know what's crazy? What? We're doing this for free. Now everyone's gonna believe you. Alright, let me get back to work, bro. You're bothering me. Unfortunately, the customer has declined to go any further. I still think this is going to be a good video because of the information provided, the crankcase waveform, and not to forget to isolate the intake from the crankcase. I think those are good tips for those who have been asking about it. And yeah, I mean, maybe at this time she won't repair, but maybe in the future she will. Who knows? At this point, right now we can't go any further, even as to like what's the root cause, what caused that cylinder to get damaged. So we're gonna leave it at that. Thank you all for taking the time to watch. I appreciate you all. Be sure to hit like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.